Hello everyone, welcome back to iOS YouTube channel, where we make research projects easy and simple for you to understand. Today we'll be moving to research methodology, which usually resides in your chapter 3. The research methodology is the most important aspect and the most feared aspect of your research project. We'll have the structure from the 3.1 to 3.7. This structure is an overview of what your chapter 3 is going to be, what your research methodology is going to be, irrespective of your school or your department or your supervisor. You need to cover all this area for your research methodology. I want you to know that this aspect is the most important aspect and the core of research projects. I regard this aspect as the most important aspect is that this point, this chapter 3, and this your methodology is going to determine if you need to proceed with your research paper or do you need to go back or rewrite your research paper. These aspects, if you make any mistake or any error occur here, all your efforts, all your resources you have been putting together is going to be waste if there's any mistake in this research methodology. That's why we say this is a most important aspect of it. Please, you can continue with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any question, you can drop it in our comment section. Now, the research methodology, I'll try to explain this from what we call methodology. Now, this is a coin of two words where we have method and we have logic here. So the method here, it simply means the ways of doing something, way of doing something. That is what the method here is means. But when we are talking about ology here, it simply means study of something. Study of something. So methodology comes from these two words, method and ology. Ology simply means you want to study something, and the ways of studying something is what we call method. Now, this is going to be an introduction aspect of what we call research methodology. Research methodology is just going to tell you how your study is going to be carried out. It's going to tell you the process that you need to carry out your study or your analysis. Mind you, research methodology is not the findings and it's not the result of your analysis. It's just a process. It's just a plan that shows the way your analysis result or findings is going to be achieved. It's just going to show us the process, and the process involves all these things, whereby we have what we call research design. Then after that research design, which is going to be 3.1, your 3.2 is going to be the source of data until you get to 3.7, which we have method of data analysis. Now here we go. The research design is the plan. Research design is just to introduce what we call research methodology. The research design in this aspect is the plan or a blueprint of how your study is going to be carried out, the process that's involved in carrying out your study. That is what research design is all about. And this is where they are going to explain if you need to use, if you're supposed to use descriptive or you want to use survey, if the survey you want to use, or you want to use descriptive analysis, or you want to use case study, or you want to use inferential analysis. This is going to give you an overall view of what you want to do. I'll refer this research design as your introduction aspect. That's going to give you the overall view. Are you doing survey? Do you want to just do descriptive? You don't want to do something inferential? And if you want to do inferential or qualitative or quantitative, you are going to tell us in your research design. This research design is the plan that we have in place in order to achieve our project analysis or the findings or the results. So then I will move to source of data. Under the source of data, we have two sources of data. Don't forget that I told you that this process is an overview of whatever you want to do. Like I said that this is just a method. This is just a way. You can choose different methods on the same topic and you arrive at the same results. We can use different plans and we arrive at the same results. So what I'm saying is method is that source of data is under research methodology. I can choose to use primary data in my source of data. That doesn't mean if another person is using secondary data, we won't arrive at the same result. What is just different? What the difference is that we use different plan or we go different ways. It doesn't mean that our result is going to be different. But that is why we call this one methodology. Explain the method, your own way that you want to use to achieve your findings or your result. That's what is going on here. And the explanation that is there under the source of data, which always be your 3.2, after the introduction aspect, you now tell us the source of data you want to use. Are you using primary data or you are using secondary data? Then I will explain this in the aspect of if you want to use primary data. Let's start with primary data. If you want to use primary data, there are some other important aspects in your primary data which are referred as 3.21, which under your primary data, when you tell us, okay, when we know that your source of data is primary data, you have to determine your population of the study. Or let me just put our population because of the board. You have the population, then your 3.22 will be sampling and sampling techniques. You have the sampling and you have the sampling techniques. So here are the important things you need under your source of data, whereby our own way, our own method of this research project is that we are using primary data. Another person can use secondary data. That's that person's way. That's that person's plan. So our method can be different. Doesn't mean our results will be different. We can use different methods and arrive at the same results in our analysis, which is chapter 4. So now here, source of data. If you choose primary data, don't forget we have just two sources of data: primary data and secondary data. So if you choose primary data as a source of data, I'm now explaining to you that you will have these elements under your primary data. What are the elements I'm talking about? The population of the study. The population of the study. But in the case that we can't cover all the population, then we introduce what we call sampling. Don't forget, sampling is a fractional part of population. Sampling is the subset of what we call population. So I'm using primary data in my own study now. Then I will need to determine what is the population of the study. It depends on the scope of your study. It depends on your case study, and it depends on the geographical area you are looking at. And actually, I'll tell you, it depends on your topic too. Let me use an example. I'm still going to release another class that will be purely practical and example. That will be class 2 for this research methodology. So here I'm just explaining the concepts for you. But let me give you an example. If you have a topic, for example, let's assume you want to look at determinants of customer loyalty on e-commerce platform. Determinant of customer loyalty on e-commerce. This is the topic you want to look at. And your case study is going to be in Oyo State. In Oyo State. That means the people that make use of e-commerce in Oyo State will represent what you call your population. But you cannot reach out to all people in Oyo State. And that's why we introduce what we call sampling and sampling techniques. This is another field of research methodology. You need to derive your what? Your sampling and your what? Your sampling techniques. Now, on the sampling, we have another thing. There's different methods and different formula that you can use to derive your sampling. Don't forget that the aspects we are under it now, we are under the primary data. And I would like to put your attention into this, that when you are determining your sampling, the sample out of the population, we have different methods that we can use. We have different formula that you can use to derive that. I'm going to explain this when we are in the practical class. I'm going to show you this. We have 3 formulas that we have. Solving formula. Solving formula. Let me use the example. Solving formula. We have solving formula. This formula, no matter what your population is going to tell you the exact sample that you need for your study. Because we cannot cover all the population, we introduce what we call sampling. Then the other thing, don't forget, I told you there is sampling and sampling techniques. Sampling and sampling techniques. We have 2 sectors of sampling techniques, where we divide those sectors as probability sampling techniques and non-probability sampling techniques. The probability sampling techniques, I will show the probability as PRB. Then we have another one that we call non-probability. That is, which techniques are you using? Once you derive your sampling, which techniques are you using? Under probability sampling techniques, we have something that we call simple random. We have something called simple random. We have what we call systematic. We have what we call stratified, and so on. I'm using this as your sampling techniques. Don't forget, these are when I'm using primary data. I'm using all these as your sampling techniques. Then, under the non-probability, we have what we call purposive. Sorry, it is purposive. We have what we call convenience. I still want to. Okay, we have purposive, we have convenience under non-probability sampling. We have clusters. Yes, we have cluster here. We have snowball. So I'm going to explain all these sampling techniques that we have when we get to the practical class, which is going to be my next video. So the probability sampling techniques, we have simple random. That means you want to choose at random, randomization. Like you don't want to choose based on your own convenience or for a particular purpose. When you want to choose at your own convenience, that means, okay, someone is my friend, then I'm going to administer this question to her because it's my friend. That is convenience under non-probability. But simple random probability techniques, you don't know, you just want to choose on random. Blindfolded, you just want to choose on random without knowing who is who or whatever it is. Then when you are using systematic is also under probability sampling. That means you want to choose based on interval. Don't forget, you want to choose based on interval. Let's assume that you have a population of 200 people. This is the population. And the techniques you want to use is systematic. If you are using systematic, that means you want to be choosing every individual that is on 10th position. That is, if I'm choosing this one as 10th, the next person I'm going to choose will be what? 20. The next person I'm going to choose is going to be what? 30. The next person I will choose is going to be what? 40. The interval here is 10. So that's what we call systematic. Then we also have stratified. Stratified is by grouping them into whether they are homogeneous or heterogeneous population. But all this, I'm going to explain it perfectly to you when I'm using one research or two research papers as a sample for you guys in my next video. Don't forget, if you have any question, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment and drop your question in our comment section. So these elements here are what I'm explaining under the source of data, which we are dealing with primary data. Don't forget that I told you guys that the research methodology is telling us the ways we need to achieve our findings or your analysis. That's what research methodology is telling us. Your own method, your plan. If different people you can be like what I said. Don't forget, you can be doing different stuff with your colleagues in the same class and realize that you are using different methods. For example, determinants of customer loyalties on e-commerce platform. Some people can choose to use secondary data by using the organization financial reports, which the data does already exist. And some people can choose to use primary data by administer questionnaire to the customer that make use of the platform. So that doesn't mean we are going to have different results. We just have different ways. We just have different methodology. That is why we are introducing this to you guys. So now here we are dealing with primary data under the source of data. And under the primary data, you are going to determine what your population is based on your case study. You are going to determine your sampling and your sampling techniques. Don't forget that your sample size cannot be determined based on your own idea. There are formulas that you can use, that you can implement in order to get your sample based on the total number of the population you have. We always represent the population as big N, and your sample will be represented as what? As small n. So that is that about that. Let's move to the next structure we have here, the next agenda. Here we have what we call research instruments. Research instrument. We determine this when you know your source of data. When you know that you are using primary data, then you need to determine what is your research instrument. Under the secondary data, we don't need all these things. Secondary data, we just have primary data, and you tell them under the source of data that, oh, you are using secondary data. Then, under the research instrument, this research instrument also have its own element too. The research instrument has its own element too, in this sense. In the what sense is that research instrument, when we are using primary data, can be your questionnaire. You can use questionnaire. You can use we have interview. Your research instruments can be just observation. This is under primary data, which my research instruments can be questionnaire, interview, or observation. But most of the researchers usually make use of what? Questionnaire or interview. So let's simplify this. Let's assume that in this primary data, what we need to use is what? Questionnaire. Our own research instrument is going to be questionnaire. So my own research instrument here is questionnaire. So if I'm using questionnaire as my own research instrument, then there are some things you need to explain when you are using questionnaire or when you are using interview or observation. Then here I'm going to explain the structure of my questionnaire, whereby I'm going to explain how I'm going to divide them. In my questionnaire, I can tell them I'm going to have a section A, I'm going to have section B, I'm going to have section C, I'm going to have section D. Where my section A always be a demographic information, or I'll call it personal information of the respondent. Personal information. So because of the board size, so I can't write too much. So we have what we call personal information. Your section B can now measure each variable you are looking at. Maybe it's going to measure your dependent variable and independent variable. I'll keep using the customer loyalties, the determinant of customer loyalties on e-commerce platform as a basic example, whereby the section B can base on customer loyalty. The question that will come out from section B that I'm going to ask my respondent is going to base on customer loyalty. The one I'm going to put in my section B would be the determinant of customer loyalties. For example, the determinant of customer loyalty is delivery and logistics. If there is quick delivery or you get your package at the right time, quickly move to what we call validity and reliability of the instrument. Now, the validity here is telling us that does your instrument measure all the necessary variables? Are you not asking questions that is outside the box? Are you asking the question that cover your variables, both independent variable and dependent variable? That is what the validity of the instrument is talking about. So if you are dealing with customer loyalties on e-commerce platform, you shouldn't be asking the questions on educational field. You shouldn't be asking a question outside e-commerce platform. That is what this one is telling you, validity. Then the reliability is telling us that your instrument that you use, how consistent is it? How trustworthy it is? That if we repeat the analysis, if we repeat the studies, are we going to have the same results? That means if we are having the same results with your instruments you are using, this shows that the instrument is what's reliable. I hope you can understand that one. It means it's reliable. Then let's move to method of data collection. Method of data collection here under the primary data, we have to tell us that how do you get your data? Although we know the instruments that you want to use, the tools that you want to use is questionnaire. But now, what is the method used to collect the data? For example, nowadays, under the method of data collection, we can have, you can administer it, your questionnaire online through email. This is a method. And you can administer it to them physically. So under this place, you need to tell us the method you use to collect your data. And some people used to use the combination of both online and physical. Then now, this is the most important aspect of this part is method of data analysis. Which method of data analysis you want to use? Here, I will explain this in 2 dimensions. That when you are trying to explain the method of analysis, here we have what we call statistical tools under your method of data analysis, and we have what we call statistical method. The statistical tools here, under the method of data analysis, you have to tell us which statistical tools are you using. What do I mean by statistical tools? The tools that you want to use to carry out the analysis. Like, are you using SPSS? Here we are going to know. Are you using eView? Are you using Stata? So here and so on. Are you using Python? Are you using R? Here, under the method of data analysis, this is where you are going to tell us. Then, which method do you want to use? Which statistical method do you want to use? Are you just using descriptive? Or are you just using correlation? Or are you just using regression? Or you are just using chi-square? So this is an aspect of all these 2 elements. You need to explain it to us under your method of data analysis. Then I want you to know that your method of data analysis, you have to know that since your chapter 1. Because if there's an issue here, that means you have to change the whole your chapter 1. What am I trying to explain to you? Because the method of data analysis can only be determined by your research objective. Note this. Your method of data analysis can only be decided by your research objective. Is your research objective that's going to tell us, are you looking at impacts? Are you looking at the relationship between the variable, both independent and dependent variable? So, like I said, 3.7 is the last things you have to do in your research methodology. Other schools or other departments, they had techniques of research to it. That one is just simple. You just have to let them know that the rules, that you follow the rules and regulations of techniques of research. So here, by now, you should understand the concepts of research methodology. So in my next video, I am going to do a practical, an example of a real life project work that's going to simplify all these concepts to you more when you are using either primary data or secondary data. Thank you for watching.